Good morning, Dan and Amy. So we're going to talk to Jimmy Pethokoukis from the American Enterprise Institute, CNBC contributor, in just a minute. But
Jimmy P.
on the importance of think tanks like the American Enterprise Institute, Cato Institute, Heritage Foundation, Competitive Enterprise Institute, Heartland Institute, Illinois Policy Institute, all these think tanks, the importance of them is interesting. It kind of brought home, end of last week, a couple of comments I saw from recipients of the Bradley Prize, the Bradley Foundation Prize, given to leaders in the realm of free minds and free markets, advancing both. Jimmy Pethokoukis, I'm sure, will be a Bradley Prize winner someday. But late last week at their annual soiree, two of the recipients, Christopher DeMuth, who's a former president of the American Enterprise Institute, he was a recipient. And he said think tanks have risen to prominence and influence at a time when too much older institutions, the ones that are closest to, have been in decline. Universities and colleges have succumbed to demands to embrace orthodoxy and suppress open inquiry and dissent. Government and politics have succumbed to demands to regiment every aspect of society and commerce and ameliorate every difficulty of private life. And so in the gap that's been created by the decline, as DeMuth puts it, I think appropriately, of universities and government, at least as civilizing institutions, cornerstones of a free society, the gap is being filled by think tanks. And how important is it? Walter Williams, our friend, the great economist from George Mason University, put a fine point on it in his acceptance speech for his Bradley Prize.
Now, for most of human history, mankind has been subject to arbitrary abuse and control by others. It's personal liberty that is the rare state of affairs and enjoyed by only a tiny part of mankind, mostly in the Western world, and for only a tiny part of its history, just a couple centuries or so. We Americans bear an awesome burden to preserve liberty. If liberty dies in America, it'll be dead for all times, everywhere.
That's a pretty powerful statement. If liberty dies in America, and it is certainly under assault from a number of directions, including the two that DeMuth identified, it will be dead forever, everywhere. That's how fragile it is. I think Williams is right. For more on this, as well as matters of Trump economic policy, we're pleased to be joined by the aforesaid future Bradley Prize winner, James Pethokoukis from the American Enterprise Institute. Jim, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. Listen, hearing the weather reports out there, I thought the weather was apocalyptic. That speech was also a little bit apocalyptic.
Walter Williams, well, you know, he doesn't like to mince words. He doesn't like to operate in grays, James. But I mean, a former head of your think tank, Christopher DeMuth, as I mentioned, also a recipient. But I mean, as somebody who works at a think tank, and I do sort of as well, not like you do, I mean, the importance of institutions like the American Enterprise Institute, just kind of taking a 30,000-foot view.
I think it's really important that we have institutions of free inquiry, where there is a competition of ideas and a search for ways to make the world a better place for more people. That's kind of my Miss America answer.
Right.
I think that's really important, and I think that competition of ideas, where you see, as Walter Williams said, he said some universities that competition is being squashed. I think it's important that we have that. It's not only universities and think tanks, as well as in the public square, that we feel comfortable challenging orthodoxy, being contrarian, even if it makes people uncomfortable. And the more places we can do that, and people are free to sort of think and explore and discover, in the world of ideas, I think the better.
Also at that ceremony, Walter Williams talked about politically correct campuses and that it's time to stop that. How has that affected your thinking?
Well, I tell you, it's affected the college search for my kids. Well, when I've been looking at colleges, I've really tried to look at places where I feel, you can say something unpopular and sort of not have, protesters outside your dormitory. I think the more we sort of shove people into a very orthodox way of thinking, I think not only will we have sort of a less interesting society, but I think we'll have also a less prosperous society because the big ideas that change things are often contrarian ideas. If people don't feel comfortable sort of breaking out of those molds, that's a recipe for stagnation, economic stagnation, intellectual stagnation, societal stagnation.
The good news for you with the kids' college search is it really narrows the search. Those
Right.
campuses that are not beset by thuggery, you got about a handful to choose from.
Yeah, it's like I can count them on one hand.
Yeah. I want to turn to the Gorsuch confirmation on Friday briefly because seating Gorsuch, which will happen today, is important for economic policy in this country as well. I mean, there was a case that was being leveled up to the Supreme Court that would have changed the nature of public sector unions in this country, likely, had Scalia lived. That was the Fredericks case, about fair share for union employees. There is a kind of Fredericks 2.0 case. It's actually an Illinois case, Janus v. AFSCME, that is making its way to the high court, too. So in terms of looking in your crystal ball for cases like this that could be decided 5-4 at the Supreme Court level with Gorsuch now seated, and the impact they could have on policy, maybe a more lasting impact on economic policy than anything President Trump and the Republican Congress do.
Yeah, I mean, it's often overlooked. I mean, you mentioned unions. That's a huge one. So the core of the new democratic thinking is that when we talk about inequality or wage stagnation, is that what's really failing this country is that we're just not unionized enough. You see efforts to unionize tech companies like Amazon more, or you want to unionize Uber. Yeah, I mean, the courts are going to be at the forefront. I was unaware of the second round of that case you were talking about. I can't wait to look at that.
Yeah.
So job numbers came out on Friday. Lowest unemployment rate, 4.5% in almost a decade. Is this just smoke and mirrors, or what's the real unemployment rate?
No, listen, I think, the economy has, the recession started at the end of 2007. We're now in 2017. The economy continues to heal. We're still creating, I think, quite a few jobs, and that was a bad jobs number. But, I think key to most economic analysis is your seventh grade math skills averaging. So I think you sort of need to average these numbers out over a number of months. And when you do that, the economy still continues to generate, 180,000 jobs a month. That tells me that we're not yet at full employment. Fed ought to take it easy. But things continue to heal. But, of course, it can be better, and I think it's incumbent upon policymakers to look at tax, regulation, and public investment and education to increase the growth potential of this economy. We can do better, but, that's okay how we're doing. I'll keep taking that for now.
Well, and the market didn't seem to react too negatively to a rather anemic 98,000 jobs created in March, to your point.
No, listen, if it's like, if it's 98,000 next month or 98,000 the month after, then that's a sign that this is about as good as we can do. But we're still creating. That's a lot of jobs. What we've been averaging, like 180,000 a month. Wage growth is sort of steady. Might be a little bit better if you fudge with the numbers a little bit than what the top line numbers say. So I think, I think it's slow and steady. I would like fast and steady, but slow and steady for now is okay.
Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary, said last week that the Trump administration is going to be aggressive on trade. He didn't get into a lot of details, but when you have Wilbur Ross as somebody who supports kind of tariffs saying aggressive on trade, that's a bit concerning. I wonder where you stand on the border adjustment tax that still seems to be kicking around and is being promoted by otherwise good free market conservative economists like Steve Moore.
Listen, I think the border adjustment tax, that supporters have sort of been distorting the reasons why. I think the negative reasons and the positive reasons, and people are against it, have sort of been also giving I think, a somewhat disingenuous case. I think there's value in it because it would raise money to help pay for any tax cuts. I think about the negative side effects, I think would not probably happen because they all assume that currencies don't adjust. So I think both sides are sort of really approaching it, I think, from a disingenuous way. I think we would be fine with it. I think we could also do most of the good tax reform that you want. You could maybe a bit less because you'd have to, I think, save some money. But you could basically do most of the good stuff without it. So I think I think way too much attention has been paid to it versus, I think, all the other bits of tax reform.
Okay, well then, if too much attention is being paid to the border adjustment tax, where should the attention be paid? And if it's on structural tax cuts, corporate and personal, how important are those to get done before the fall recess, and what are the consequences if it doesn't happen?
I think it's listen, if it doesn't happen, it's a huge missed opportunity. So I think if there's something on taxes about the left and the right agree on most of them, not maybe your Bernie Sanders people, is that the business tax code is kind of a mess, and that's where we should probably be focused on. I think the clock is ticking. I think you really don't want this thing to start slipping too far into 2018. It would be great if you could get it done in 2017. But listen, I think tax reform is important. I don't think it's the only thing that's important. I think any good you go do on taxes, you were mentioning trade earlier, you could undo with bad trade policy. So I think you don't want to give with one hand and lose with the other. But this should absolutely be a priority. I think you need to get tax rates down. You need to clean up the tax code. I think that's a key thing if we want to increase the growth potential of the economy, not just over the next year or two, but over the longer term.
He is Jim Pethokoukis, CNBC contributor, columnist for the American Enterprise Institute. Jim, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Always love doing it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.